How the narcissist devalues different victims. Devaluation. This period of the narcissistic dynamic is regarded as always being part of the dynamic and understandably the worst part of it. Those who consider it as an ever-present part of the dynamic, however, are overstating its presence, because whether devaluation appears at all, and if it does, how it will manifest depends very much on the nature of the dynamic within our appliances. Regular listeners to my work will understand that I divide appliances, namely victims, into three categories: primary, secondary and tertiary sources. Commencing with the tertiary source, most of the time our engagements with tertiary sources, which means strangers and acquaintances, do not include any devaluation. There are two main reasons for this. One, the engagement is brief. We either engage with the tertiary source once for a short time and never again, or we engage with them repeatedly, but it is only ever brief in nature. And two, the needs of the facade mean that engaging with the tertiary source in a benign way is actually the most effective method of proceeding. It is the case, however, that tertiary sources can and are devalued. They will be insulted, ignored, triangulated with other superior ranking sources. This devaluation may be because the tertiary source has ignited our fury, for instance, bartender failing to serve as a head of somebody else. But the devaluation may just occur because we regard it as an expedient response for the assertion of superiority and supremacy. For instance, we see that it would draw amusement or admiration from our friends, non-intimate secondary sources, if we pour scorn on a homeless person in the street or we insult the waitress in a bar. Neither of these people will have necessarily criticised us or wounded us, but in certain instances, the narcissism determines that the individual is expendable, and therefore by devaluing them, we will gain negative fuel from them, but also positive fuel from other sources. And as a consequence, this ongoing need for fuel is served, and served well, by these two or more streams of fuel. Any devaluation of a tertiary source is short in duration. It is a burst of negative fuel, but it is not hugely potent. Indeed, the admiration from the secondary or primary source which it brings about is more potent when compared to other sources, and the quantity of fuel provided by the tertiary source is low. This is because the tertiary source will not be bound to us, and therefore, after a period of time of responding in a manner which provides this negative fuel, the tertiary source, more often than not, will disengage. A tertiary source finds it far easier to disengage from us than any other appliance. The period of devaluation for a tertiary source may be less than a minute if they provide negative fuel and then back off. Of course, if they continue to engage us and provide challenge fuel, we will keep provoking them and also asserting our perceived superiority over them in order to put them in their place. We also, of course, cannot have some upstart tertiary source making us look bad in front of other superior sources. We are unlikely to keep pursuing the tertiary source. Thus, if we upbraid a waiter and he retreats to the kitchen, we are unlikely to follow him and keep the devaluation going. Instead, we take the negative fuel from his angry reaction and let him withdraw. We consider it largely beneath us to keep pressing such an individual. Of course, if the waiter returns to us, we will devalue again, and keep doing so for as long as he keeps appearing in front of us. It is unlikely that the tertiary source will be smeared as a consequence of this devaluation, because ultimately within our fuel matrix the tertiary source is not of significant importance, and therefore it is not worth expending the energy nor time on smearing them. We may see this tertiary source on another occasion and provoke them again, or we may engage with them in a benign fashion. It does not matter to us how we treated them on the previous interaction because of the way we compartmentalize. In respect of secondary sources, devaluation does occur, But if and when it does, it is for a reason which is directly linked to the behaviour of the secondary source. If someone is a non-intimate secondary source, therefore they are a family member, friend, or colleague, they will usually enjoy an elongated and extensive golden period. Devaluation of the secondary source will only occur where that individual has sought to expose us, challenge us extensively, or has turned off the fuel supply completely. The devaluation will of course be longer than that experienced by the tertiary source, because the secondary source will be bound more closely to us. This binding will be as a consequence of the nature of the relationship. The person is in our social circle with other people, they work with us, or they are in our family grouping. But also because we will have put more effort into binding them to us. Accordingly, the secondary source is less likely to withdraw in the same way that a tertiary source would do so. Instead, the secondary source is more likely to want to try to find out why they are being treated this way, to seek to make amends and to gain our favour once again. Sometimes this devaluation occurs as a consequence of needing to send a signal to other secondary sources that they ought not to cross, so that they realise it is preferable to remain loyal to us than cross us in some way. The secondary source who is devalued is likely also to be smeared by us. We will want other secondary sources of the same circle or ilk to turn against the devalued secondary source and complete their isolation and to ostracise them. We are conscious of the maintenance of the facade, and therefore we will look to present a reason for why this secondary source has fallen from favour, is no longer invited, is not welcome at certain gatherings, and so forth. The period of devaluation for a secondary source varies in terms of the actual engagement and the period over which the person is regarded as black. If the secondary source wants to talk to us to find out why they are treated this way, we will keep devaluing them, so this might be a matter of minutes or a couple of hours. If they remain proximate to us and keep providing negative fuel, we will keep devaluing and provoking them. If they retreat and try to engage us on another occasion, they will remain black until they do something, or there is an external act which causes us to regard them as white, and we welcome them to the fold again. For instance, if the secondary source seeks forgiveness and as a residual benefit we want, we will extend our graciousness to admit them into the relevant circle again. If we see no purpose other than negative fuel, then they remain painted black, and they will be disengaged from, and we will find a replacement for them soon enough. In some instances, the secondary source may disengage and have nothing more to do with us. Thus, a friend never socializes with us. The family member withdraws, or the colleague moves workplaces or department. Sometimes they may not have such an option, and instead they remain in effect a scapegoat for us, remaining black for years, and are devalued further each time there is any interaction with us. Thus, every time there is a family gathering, they will be subject to contemptuous comments, triangulation, or silent treatments. Of course, this long-lasting devaluation may be intermittent, as we may only see this secondary source at certain events or places. Similarly to the tertiary source, we will rarely keep seeking out the secondary source for the purposes to devalue him or her. Where the secondary source is of an intimate variety, either an intimate partner secondary source or dirty secret intimate partner secondary source, then the dynamic alters. There are two potential forms of devaluation. The first is used as a corrective measure to bring the IPSS or DSI-IPSS back into line. Thus, devaluation and disengagement is not a certainty, but instead, if the IPSS or dirty secret responds favourably to this warning, then the devaluation will halt and the golden period continues. This is because the shelf IPSS or dirty secret IPSS has fuel which is regarded as still valuable and not stale. And devaluation is used because they are not complying as they ought to do and not as a consequence of staleness. This corrective devaluation brings them back into line, and thus the corrective devaluation halts. The second is where the shelf IPSS or dirty secret IPSS does not respond to the warning, and thus their failure and treachery means that he or she must now be punished as we head towards disengagement. The devaluation in this instance will be more intense than the corrective devaluation, but it will not last for that long, because either the IPSS or Dirty Little Secret stays out of our way, or if they don't, we want to turn to a different secondary source of an intimate nature, either Shelf or Dirty Little Secret, or find a new one, and therefore disengagement comes along quickly. Finally, there is the intimate partner primary source. The intimate partner primary source is the person who suffers the longest devaluation, the harshest devaluation, and is the one which is recognised by most people. This happens because, 1. You promise to be the one. Your failure to live up to our ideals means you must be punished. We are not going to let you off the hook easily. Such punishment is, with lesser and mid-range narcissists, instinctive. 2. Your negative fuel is potent, plentiful and frequent. Therefore, we want to keep drawing that from you. 3. This negative fuel also provides contrast and the motivation for our seduction of your potential replacement. 4. You are bound to us, and therefore you are far less likely to withdraw from us. This binding is both emotional and non-emotional. Emotionally, it arises because you want to return to the golden period. You want to make everything all right. You are a love devotee and want to have love triumph, love conquer. You may well be codependent. You do not want to admit defeat. And ultimately, you are addicted to us. The non-emotional are matters such as finances, children, house, family pressures, and so forth. The combination of these factors means that you cling to us, and because you most likely live with us, your devaluation will occur each and every day. Number 5. We grant you respite periods. This takes place within the umbrella of the devaluation period and means that you are given renewed hope, so you stick around. And also it means your potential for becoming numbed and unresponsive is reduced by these periods, which allows you to gather some strength again. Number 6. The intimate partner primary source may be the only person in our fuel matrix who is being devalued, and this will usually take place behind closed doors to preserve the facade, so there is less likelihood of external interference which will disrupt the devaluation. The devaluation of the intimate partner primary source is the most brutal of all the devaluations of appliances. It continues for the longest. It can be years, even decades in some instances. And within this devaluation comes a whole host of manipulations and abuses which cover the emotional, the financial, the sexual, and the physical.